Hello, hello, is this thing on? Hello. Oh, there we go. Hello, is this thing on? I know things are looking a little weird today. Alright, took me a hot second to get things set up. Also, just, the way things, just the way we roll over here. Yes, it is. Amazing. I'm glad it's on. Glad it's working. Amazing, amazing. All right, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon here in my time zone. I apologize. Let me do this thing and then do this thing. I'm not quite set up. You're welcome. The sheer professionalism. Am I right? The sheer professionalism, the level of professional. Also, my setup, super profesh. Anywho, okay. My name is Dr. Shannon Coates, and my pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I am a singer, educator, and maximizer. I am coming to you live today in some live office hours from a little town that is north of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. And these are the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendake Neo-Wentzio peoples. And I do this pretty regularly, these live office hours. Oh, good afternoon, Allison. Nice. Yeah, good afternoon. I do these office hours pretty regularly, and in addition to doing live office hours, I do some, I develop resources, courses, and trainings for voice pros, voice teachers, mostly voice teachers. But anyone else is welcome to take these trainings, absolutely, to work with me. All good. And currently, the VoicePed Undegree, second class of the VoicePed Undegree is underway. We just had some office hours this morning, and woo! I'm loving it. So fun to work with these voice teachers, let me tell you. Smart folks. And coming up, I am going to do a class called Diagnostics 101, which you will hear more about at some point. And at some point, we'll have a wait list ready. Maybe even by the end of today. Who knows? Dare to dream, I say. Just keep that in the back of your mind. December, we're going to do Diagnostics 101. In the meantime, today, I wanted to talk about a few of the things that make it, ew, David. A few of the things that make me want to say that. Ew, David. Ew. I don't think I do it as well as she does, but if you know Schitt's Creek, you know what I'm talking about. Ew, David. I have collected over the past, I have an ongoing collection of things that I want to share. Of course, folks who I'm like, yes, everybody should have this information, or everyone should see this video. So that I share those, reshare those, of course. And I also have a collection of things where I'm like, ooh, I wish you hadn't said it that way. I wish you didn't say that. Ew, David. So I do have a collection of those. And, it happens. And I am sure that someone could find a whole bunch of things that I wish I hadn't said. I'm sure there are some things. Don't do that. Please don't do that. I mean, do it if you want to. I don't know. I'll apologize. There are lots of things out there that I wish I hadn't said. I'm getting better. But here are some things. And I posted some of these things. Here are some things that I've heard. Voice pros talking about, and I'm not talking about sort of your like average voice teacher who is on the socials and just getting their name out there and just like talking about singing. I'm not talking about that sort of like those folks. I am talking about the folks kind of like me who are out there and who have a platform and who are in a position of speaking to and or for the voice teaching community. So those are the folks I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the folks like me. And so those are the folks. Those are the folks. I would very, 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 very much like us to examine some of the statements we make and the wording we use. And, you know, I'm going to just squirrel for a second here. My friend Michelle Marquardt DeVoe posted something just today. We were having a discussion about this in the Speakeasy Cooperative a little while ago too, and now I want to write something down. Oh, there it is. We were having this discussion. She posted just today, and I reshared it, about how the fact that when we're marketing or when we're on social media, so often social media is a platform for the short sentence, the statement. And the way to get the algorithm going is to say something a tiny bit controversial, right? Or to say something that's a little pointy, or something that has that, like a big blanket statement, right? And especially if those big like blanket statements have maybe a little bit of fear attached to them or a little negative connotation attached to them. That's kind of a good way to get the algorithm going, unfortunately. And so the social media platforms are not great places for in-depth conversations, for subtlety, for like complex ideas, for saying yes and. They're not great spaces for that overall. And so that's part of the reason that I do these live office hours, is because I can throw up a like short like thing to get people talking, and then I do live office hours so that I can actually go into the complexity of it. And I feel like I can actually, say, get to some of the nuance at least. So that I think that's a challenge of social media. And so a lot of times then the things that come up from other voice pros who have platforms like mine, I understand often that we're working to like catch people's attention and to say a thing that can be, that gets into the algorithm. And also, I would love us to be way more careful about what we're saying, and also what the implications of what we're saying are, right? Just a little bit more careful. I would love that. So I'm speaking to myself too here. We're all under this spell. So one of the things that comes up often, and this is something that I saw a Voice Pro post quite a while ago now, your speaking voice can ruin your singing voice. So that's one of the things that came up. And what don't I love about this? I mean, I'm sure if you've been following me for a while, you probably have a good idea of what I don't love about it and why it makes me go, ew, David. Why? Why does it make me go that? Well, first of all, I really dislike the use of the word ruin to talk about a voice, a human being, a thing that we do. Like, ruin. Yeah, Ian, I think you're saying that. Yes, exactly. Yes, it's fascinating. I market in the opposite manner on social media, have really in-depth conversations, avoid triggering folks with confrontational snippets, etc. Yes, I think that conventional wisdom doesn't cover all uses. Absolutely, Ian, absolutely. And like, you're kind of proving my point, right? Because you're like, you're the kind of person who tries to have the deeper conversation, tries to have those larger tries to provide the context, tries to get into the context. And so that's what you're doing in the comment, right? So you're sort of build it and they will come approach. Yes, build it and they will come, but also who are you actually attracting, right? So are you attracting the folks who, like, I don't know, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, and all good. What I'm calling out is just the sort of, as you know, these sort of like blanket statements that are designed to kind of get the trigger going. And you may be swimming upstream a little bit, Ian, using in the attempt to use social media in that way. I mean, it's working great. It's working for you. That's awesome. But you also it may be hard work. I don't know. Anywho, your speaking voice can ruin your singing voice. Your speaking voice can ruin your singing voice. Not a fan. Okay, so it grabs the attention because you think, oh my gosh, what? My speaking voice can ruin my singing voice? And so someone like myself, someone like Ian, for example, is going to look at that and be like, oh, you know, there's a lot more to it. And also, like, we're going to ignore it. However, not everyone is built that way. Not everyone actually has the information behind the understanding of your speaking voice can ruin your singing voice and understands what the actual full context of that might be, right? So when we say something can ruin your singing voice, first of all, that word is not my favorite. And because I don't, are we ruining the voice, or is it that if you're using your speaking voice in a specific way, or over time you are using your speaking voice in a specific way, it may limit that voice use may limit your options when you want to use your voice for singing. Yes, there is a cause and effect. Absolutely there is. But the language is what I don't love. And the intention behind the language to sort of like scare you into going, oh, what can happen here? And then we also start to pass that on to the singers we're working with, right? So when we start to pass on that understanding to the singers we work with, because we go like, okay, well, someone who knows what they're talking about said that if you're speaking badly, then you can ruin your singing voice. And so now we're working with singers in a fear-based, deficit-based way, where we're talking to singers about the bad things they're doing in their speaking that's going to make it so they cannot sing. I would love for us to have the language of options, and you get to make informed decisions about your voice. So you get to make informed decisions about how you use your voice, and you get to make informed decisions about the impact of your speaking voice on how you want to use your singing voice. And you also get to go and see the specialists, perhaps a singing teacher, or perhaps a therapist, an SLP, a speech language pathologist who works with singers. Perhaps you get to see a specialist to help you work through some of the things in your speech that are affecting your ability to use your singing voice in the way that you want to use it, right? To see how that approach is different. One is saying, here's the negative and here's the fear. One is real stick-based, and the other one is you've got options and you've got agency. And I've got some information that will be useful to you in order for you to be able to make the decisions you want to make about your voice and how you use it. All right. Make sure your voice is properly warmed up. Ooh. Anytime we have the word properly in reference or proper in reference to anything involved in singing, I go, ew, David, ew. Why? Well, properly has that inherent understanding that there is one way to do something. And because I was raised the way that I was raised, there's also an inherent understanding that there's a moral imperative as well, right? So I've got a moral imperative that goes along with properly. Like, you're a bad person if you don't do it properly, and you're a good person if you do it properly. So for me, that's not for everyone, of course, but for me, there's a moral imperative along with that word, and along with the should. So properly, not my favorite. There is no proper. There is no right or wrong. So there is no proper way to warm up. There is a way to warm up your voice that works for you. And again, it's about the options. So what are the options for you that are going to allow for you to use your voice in the way that you want to use it? Who gets to decide what properly means, right? Don't love it. And also, like, make sure to properly warm up your voice. Again, here's where the context comes into place, as Ian is talking about as well, where the context comes into place. There are lots of times when a vocal warm-up, and lots of singers for whom a vocal warm-up doesn't look like what we might think it looks like. And there are lots of times when we don't need a warm-up. Who who says what a warm-up is, right? And who says? So how are we developing a warm-up? Sure, is it important that we understand when and how to use a warm-up? Absolutely. But the important part about it is not that we are arbitrarily saying you must warm up and here's how you must warm up. The important part and the way that we want to approach in teaching is that we are supporting singers with options. So we're saying, okay, what's your end goal? What are the things that impede you from being able to use your voice in the way you want to use it? Okay, so then maybe here are some of the things you need to think about or consider doing. Let's explore some of the things that are options so that you can use to get your voice to where it is, to where you can use it in the way you want to use it, rather than prescriptively, you must warm up your voice and you must do it in this way. There's only this one proper way. All right. I've talked about this one before. If something is important to you, you find the time to fit it in. This was in reference to practicing, and this was, in all fairness, this was on not a voice teacher's, specifically, sorry, this was said by someone who doesn't only teach singing. So this was also said by someone who teaches some other instruments. And I've talked about this before. This is along the same lines as well. We all have the same 24 hours in a day. No, friend. No, we do not. We do not all have the same 24 hours in a day. And just because something is important to you, just because you would like to do it, does not mean that you will prioritize it in the way that you would like to prioritize it. We understand this from, for example, from understanding how certain neurodivergent brains work. So even if I know that something is important to me, even if I know that something is even if I know that I will enjoy practicing, even if I know that I want to practice, even if I schedule it, even if I have all of the things in place that are motivating for lots of other brains, I may still not practice. And it doesn't mean that it's not important to me. It means that I've got to figure out some other ways to support this brain to do some task initiation around practicing. And so the other thing is, I mean, this is quite an ableist statement as well. There are lots of assumptions there. You know, the person who is chronically ill, for example, does not have the same 24 hours in a day that someone who is able-bodied does. The person who is, I mean, there's so many intersections here where you just don't have the same, it's not the same 24 hours. And finding time, it's not the same for every person. It's just not. So what do we communicate to students when we believe this about the singers we work with? What are we communicating? We're communicating, well, we're communicating if you clearly you don't think it's important enough, clearly you aren't valuing this, clearly your parents are paying for something that you don't want to do, right? We communicate this in a way that communicates this value judgment around their behavior and their character. So there's a value judgment that is inherent in this saying about people's character and their ability, rather than understanding ability. So, and privilege and intersections of privilege, and rather than understanding those things. So what do we want to work toward? Again, what are your goals as a singer? What do we want to communicate? We want to communicate, hey, what are your goals as a singer? Okay. What are the things that motivate you to do the things you love? What are those things? How are you motivated? We want to start to understand how someone is motivated, not tell them how to be motivated. As an ADHD person, I can tell you all of the things that should be motivating. Through my whole life, I know all of the things that should be motivating. I know those things, like off by heart. They are written in my heart. I know the things. You do. Well, all you have to do is make sure you're practicing at the same time every day. Just put it in your calendar. Yes, that is great. No, not motivating for me. So understand the ways that the singers you work with are motivated. Understand why they want to do the things they want to do. Understand if practicing is actually going to look the way you think it should look. Start to work with singers to find the options that work the best for them. You can also start to suggest some things, right, for practicing. So you can suggest some things like, hey, what would happen if if we had some group practice sessions over Zoom? It's a great way to do some body doubling to get some things done that you would like to do. What would happen if we had some practice sessions, or if practicing in this way is important to you and you want to do it, which you're telling me it is, terrific, then let's figure out some of the things. What would happen if we had like a performance class every 3 weeks? That'll get you a little urgency in there, won't it? So then you're like, actually, you're practicing because every 3 weeks the performance class is coming up. So you actually, practice because of the urgency of the performance class versus only practicing the night before the performance. Oops. All right. Whoa. One of my least favorite sayings that you hear quite a bit in sort of marketing circles is where a lot of singers go wrong. You hear that in lots and lots of marketing, right? So you hear it all over the place in the socials. Where mothers go wrong, where parents go wrong, where teachers go wrong. One of the ways teachers go wrong, right? And I think you already know why I don't love it, because where we go wrong, really? I hate the moral imperative. Hate it. What are you maybe going to say instead? You're going to find some things. So you're going to be like, here's a thing that people tell me they don't love. Here's a thing that I found really challenging. So you're going to go into that way and then talk about the thing that is going to, that you have found useful, and or that you have worked with people that the people you work with have found useful, versus here's where you go wrong and here's the right way. Oh gosh. Okay. I don't love this one. Really great singers don't make great teachers because singing came easily to them. So first of all, of course, I don't love just the blanket statement there. This sort of assumption that all great singers, first of all, who gets to decide who's a great singer? Anyway, whatever. And also, who gets to decide who's a great teacher? Whatever. Fine. We'll leave those two. Let's leave those two things aside. Who's deciding? Great. But the understanding here is, if you were a really well coordinated singer, so the technical things that you needed to work out in your singing in order to find the coordinations that you wanted and needed in order to communicate in the way you wanted to communicate, if those came relatively easy to you, if you are a relatively coordinated singer, and you didn't have to work out technical issues, or you didn't have to, find coordinations in a specific way, you didn't have any singing challenges, if you will, then you won't be an effective teacher because you didn't have to work on anything yourself. So there's a weird correlation there between inherent relationship that is implied, relationship there, that that being able to sing well and being able to teach well are related, right? So that the skill of singing and the skill of teaching are related. And so if you had to develop this skill of singing, then if you had a harder time developing this skill of singing, then you will be a better teacher because you had to work so hard to develop this skill. So this skill is already developed, or better developed. These are two different skills. Teaching and singing are two different skills. They're two different skill sets. So yes, there is a relationship or there may be a relationship in the sense that if I have taken lots of lessons. I've had to take lots and lots of voice lessons. I may have seen teaching modeled for me in a way that is useful for me when I start to teach. So yes, I may have, and I may have a lot of other, this is more perhaps about volume than about necessarily just because I had to work on my voice. There may also be an increased level of empathy or of an understanding of working through a process, an increased level of curiosity and exploration that may be inherent in that person, and perhaps a little bit of stick-to-itness, if you will, that maybe that person may have learned through the process of developing their singing skill, that will be useful to them as a teacher and may actually ensure that they are a more empathetic, perhaps, or a more supportive of the process kind of teacher. Sure, there are those things. Absolutely, that's possible. That's absolutely possible. And of course, there are lots and lots of singers, wonderful singers who've had wonderful careers who, absolutely, absolutely bear out this saying of well, now I've had this wonderful career and now I'm hired to teach at a university or in a program because of my career. And no one has ever checked whether I learned how to teach. We don't know. Well, you did some master classes, so clearly that's fine. We will hire you. Right? So there certainly there's a reason that saying exists, of course. But I wanted to just be clear on the fact that these are two different skill sets. You being a wonderful, sort of natural, well-coordinated singer, you're still going to need to learn how to teach, of course, in the same way that someone who has taken a lot of voice lessons and or who has had to work really hard on their own voice still needs to develop the skill of teaching. They're two different skill sets. The skill of teaching. Does it put you a little bit ahead? Maybe it does. If you've had to work on your voice, sure, maybe it does. But I just hate I just hate yes, we all need to develop the skill of teaching. Teaching, it's a different thing. Hey, this one is in 3 parts, right? So a strong understanding of the anatomy of the voice is essential for a singing teacher to instruct their students on proper technique and avoid injury. Also, that's not grammatically great, and to help their students avoid injury, I think would be probably a better way to put that, but whatever, I'm just a picky grammar person. Anyway, strong understanding, so we've had lots of conversation about this on the socials, and of course, context is everything. So here's the thing, a strong understanding, woohoo! A strong understanding. Who decides what it means to have a strong understanding? Who decides what that means? Who decides when you have enough anatomy? When you know enough anatomy? Who decides? First of all, that's my first issue with this statement. The second issue with this statement is that it is essential for a singing teacher. Essential. No, it's really not. It's really not. The third thing, so again, these are two different skill sets. Knowing anatomy and physiology, understanding how the voice works can be very useful to you as a voice teacher. Of course it can be. Knowing it does not mean you're going to be able to teach. These are two different things. Teaching is a skill set that you can develop. Absolutely. Are some people more, for whatever reason, more effective teachers off the hop? Of course. Some people are better coordinated athletes off the hop. Some people, we call it talent. Some people are more coordinated singers from the beginning, and that we say, oh, they're so talented. Well, yeah, they're just more coordinated. Same with teaching. Some people are better natural and more effective voice teachers or teachers. That's fine. We all still need to develop our skill. It is a skill that you develop. So knowing anatomy and physiology is one thing. And don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. Not at all. It's just not essential. And also, it doesn't make you an effective voice teacher. because there's a whole bunch of steps between like knowing anatomy and physiology and also then being able to teach and also to use that information effectively in teaching. So that these two things, they're not the same. So we will context. The other thing is that people who are teaching different, there's an assumption, again, there's an assumption here around what people are teaching, what kind of singing teacher we are. It's similar to when we say, oh, well, it's classical music, right? There's an assumption, we have this assumption that classical music means Western classical music. There's Indian classical music. There's Chinese classical music. There's a lot of different kinds of classical music out there. So like when we say part of the reason I say Western classical music is I'm just like, let's acknowledge the fact that this is specifically what I mean, versus a singing teacher. Lots and lots of folks do not need the level of anatomy and physiology to teach effectively that, say, someone who works very specifically with perhaps injured voices, someone who works very specifically with specific kinds of singers. They need a lot more anatomy and physiology than someone perhaps or they may want to have a lot more anatomy and physiology than perhaps your sort of typical independent voice teacher might need or want. The other thing that is frustrating to me with these kinds of statements, with the understanding the anatomy of voice is essential. What is frustrating to me with that kind of statement is it's used as a weapon. It's weaponized. There's fear in there. It's weaponized, perhaps not intentionally, likely not intentionally, but it is used as a weapon to sort of dig at voice teachers in what often feels like a very vulnerable part, which is this thing where I may not be the best voice teacher I can be. Why am I not the best voice teacher I can be? Or to sell stuff, 100%. It's used to sell stuff. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's all of these are about marketing, right? Like they're all about like this little fear factor. It's going to get me into the algorithm. I'm going to draw people in because I'm hitting their pain point. So the pain point of me being insecure as a voice teacher and perhaps not knowing as much as I could know and perhaps not serving the singers I work with very well or as well as I could means that when I say, oh, anatomy is essential, the knowledge of anatomy is essential for you as a voice teacher, when I say that as someone who's trying to sell you an anatomy course, I'm leaning into your pain point around your insecurity. And the insecurity, one of the main things, I mean, I'm going to do Diagnostics 101, the class next in December. And one of the main reasons I'm doing the Diagnostics 101 class is because I really want to dispel this myth around how much information you need in order to be an effective diagnostician in the voice studio. It's less than you think. It really is. It's less than you think. So we get caught up in this understanding. And also, I've said this before on lives, the more you understand how to teach, the more you understand student-led work, the less important diagnostic skills become. The less important it becomes for you to understand anatomy and physiology in your own mind. So the fear around, I need to know anatomy and physiology, and also my teaching is really great. This starts to move. My teaching is actually becoming really great and really effective. Oh, I actually don't need the anatomy and physiology as much as I thought I did. That starts to move far down as I start to increase my teaching skills. And then the anatomy and physiology doesn't become this fear point, it becomes this very much interest point that is supporting my teaching. And because I know how to teach, my teaching skills are great, I can incorporate the knowledge around anatomy and physiology in an effective way versus some of the ways that it becomes not effective and gets us caught up and we obsess about it, right? And we don't trust ourselves. Okay. So I don't love that for all of those reasons. And I really don't love it when we use it as this like bludgeoning tool where we're saying you have to have an understanding of anatomy and physiology in order to instruct students on proper technique. There's that word again, proper technique. Right. So, yes, exactly, right? This is how I wish physical therapists were taught this way. Oh my gosh. Let me say a thing. Let me decide whether I want to say a thing. Let me make a decision. Hmm. 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 I overhear coaches in gym situations. I overhear coaches, so like personal trainers. Yep. Physical. These are not physiology people, but personal trainers in training situations who are not good coaches. Why? And by good, I mean effective. They are not as effective as they could be. Why? Why are they not as effective as they could be? They know lots of information. They have kinesiology degrees. They have lots of good information. Why are they not effective? Because their problem solving is not about, and their diagnostics is not about, is so tied to that understanding of anatomy and physiology. Am I saying that they shouldn't have anatomy and physiology? Of course they should, of course. However, it's not very effective when you're coaching someone and you're telling them what to do rather than allowing them to explore. It's not effective. So what are we doing in our, like, what are we doing in our voice studios when we have all that anatomy and physiology information and then we're just using it to sort of bludgeon students? It's not useful. It's not useful. And then we use this, we say, you have to have this because otherwise you won't instruct students on proper technique. Dude, I hate that word proper, first of all, as we have already discussed. I hate that word. And I do have issues with technique, not because I think it's a terrible word, but just because I think it gets used in such a, proper, there's this like idea around proper. What is technique? Technique for me is, let's figure out what you need to do in order to make the sounds you want to make and so that you can communicate in the way you want to communicate. Let's just figure that out. Let's figure out those coordinations together. Let's figure that out. Let's give you options. Let's make sure you have options so that you can create the sounds and do the things you want to do with your voice. That's technique. Let's develop your options together. That's your technique, right? So for me. So in that case, there's no proper technique. And also, when you're scaring voice teachers into saying, well, you don't have a strong understanding of anatomy of the voice, then you're not instructing students on proper technique. And then the third part, and avoid injury. So you have to have a strong understanding of anatomy and physiology in order to instruct students on proper technique and to help them avoid injury. Yeah, our job isn't to like tell students what to do so that they avoid injury. Our job is to give singers the options they need so they can make the decisions they want. The information they need so that they can make the decisions around what they want to do. That's what it is. That's what it is. Also, professional singers who are doing this a lot aren't injuring themselves, aren't being injured, are not incurring an injury because they're doing it wrong. They are incurring an injury because they're doing it a lot. Doing it a lot. Professional singers generally have a choice, not always, generally have choices around how much, what risks they want to take with their voice, how much they want to do, what they want to do. They generally have a choice. Younger singers often don't have choices and or don't understand the risks of their choices. So that's our job. Our job is not to say, oh yeah, you shouldn't do that. Don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to injure your voice. You're going to injure yourself. That's not our job. Our job is, here are the risks. Here are the possibilities. And to say, here are the costs. And to help singers decide whether or not they want to or can afford to pay that cost. Can they afford to pay the cost? Singers don't know yet, often, especially young singers. They don't know yet what the cost is, first of all, and whether they can afford it. They don't know yet. That's fine. We help them to figure that out. We help them to make those decisions around what the cost is. We help them to get the information about what the cost is. Yes. Does that mean that we need to have, that it is essential for us to have an understanding of the anatomy of the voice in order to have the information in order to allow, to support folks to make those decisions? It helps to have that information, for sure. For sure it helps to have that information. You know what else is great? What other information is great? What does that feel like in your body right now? Yeah, it feels like a lot of tension? Interesting. So let's see if we can get that released. Because tension may not be the thing that we're looking for right now. That's also really good information to help singers understand whether or not they are what the cost of this behavior might be, or what the cost of this particular way of singing or using the voice might be. Teaching singers to be able to understand, feel in their own bodies what's happening, that's essential information. That's essential. What does it feel like to you? What's the cost of that? That's essential information. And that's teaching. That's pedagogy. Supporting singers, supporting learners so that they can understand what their choices are, what they're giving information, allowing them to explore options so that they understand what the costs are, or so they understand what the risks are when we're talking about injury and avoiding injury. So they understand what the risks are. They can make decisions around whether or not they want to use this coordination, for how long they would like to use this coordination, and how to mitigate the risks of particular coordinations, right? Like that's we're not in the business of telling people what to do and what not to do. I don't think. We're in the business of supporting learning. I think. So that's my little ew. Dang it. Ew. Ew. When you see some of those statements, those sort of real blanket statements, especially if they use the word proper. Ew. I have a real reaction to proper. If you don't have a reaction to it, that's cool. It's all good. I have a reaction. Hits me the wrong way. But if you see those statements on the socials, and you see them being used for marketing, and you see them just like, what's happening there? What are we trying to sell? What fear is that hitting? What kind of like fear? What does that seem to be bringing up in me? Is it hitting on this fear that I might not be serving the singers I work with as well as I could be? Okay, that might be intentional. That we're hitting on that fear, and we're kind of nudging into that little pain point. And maybe it's an intentional in a good way, because we're offering something that is going to help to alleviate that pain point or that fear. It may be a good thing. But I bet we can do that in a way. I bet we can do that in a way that is has a little more nuance. It's not fear-based. I bet we can. Maybe. I bet we can. Let's try. All right. There we go. A little context, a little explain, a little bit of subtlety. All right. Take care. Have a good weekend. Have a little think, maybe, about some of the things that we're doing. All right. See ya. See you later. Have a good weekend. Boop. Gonna end that one. And I'll end this one. See you later.